support this. And I should probably share my desktop as well. All right, so we're going to try to get you far enough that you have an understanding and you can start working with it. I'm not going to guarantee that you can have everything. I'm willing to stay later than an hour if we need to. Hopefully we won't need to. But if we also need to, if you guys feel a need, we can do this again in a week and go deeper, or you can stick around and ask questions. So basically GitHub is, as was mentioned, it's a version control system, which means you put stuff out there and it stays forever, which is great. And because it's Git is a version control system, GitHub is one of the many websites where you can put Git repositories that'll host Git repositories for you so that people in the broad world can actually find them. So let's start off. You can ignore all these things over here because they're just my little icons, so I don't have to draw them every time. But we're going to start just with, this is a GitHub repository. And I don't know, I'm going to call it repo for now. I'm going to give it a name. We're going to call it repo. Repo is a repository. And it exists out there on GitHub. You can go there, you can see it. It doesn't exist there yet. Part of what I'm going to show you is how to get set up. But this is just to give you the vocabulary so we can talk together and kind of figure out what's going on, and you know what I'm referring to when I talk about locals and remotes and things like that. This is a remote repository. It exists out on GitHub. It could easily be GitLab. It could easily be Kitware's version, their own personal installation of GitLab. The idea, though, is that this exists somewhere else, right? It's a server. You're paying for it, or you're accessing it. You're not paying for it necessarily. And you can access it. When you want to use it, what you're generally going to do is you're going to make a clone. Well, I'm calling it a clone because I'm getting ahead of myself. You're going to make a fork of repo, right? And what a fork is you ask wherever you have repo stored to copy it and put it in your web setup, right? So in this particular one, repo lives, again, in the cloud, lives someplace out there. Could be GitHub, it could be GitLab, again, any place. But you've now cloned it and you have a full working copy of repo. And it's identical to repo at the time you cloned it, right? So this is just another complete version of repo that you can use. When you actually want to do development, though, in general, we don't want to be, come on, I didn't say fine, I said copy, there we go. In general, we don't want to be typing in the cloud. What we want to do is we want to download the clone to our own machine. So this is in the world up here, the cloud, and down here is on people's actually owned laptops. So we'll put a little divider in there to divide the world up into good and evil, right? Evil's above, not evil's below, or however you want to do it, whatever fits. You can ask GitHub or Git to clone this repo and actually move it onto your machine, or anybody can move it onto their machine. Come on, give me this. There we go. Right, so this is a fork. and this is a clone. Okay, and fork brings it from one place in the web to another place on the web, different account. Clone brings it down onto your machine. All of these are equivalent. As far as the repository goes, they all hold the same information. Okay? And now somebody else, maybe the guy that runs the project, is going to have a clone of this repository. And we're going to say that this repository is special because this repository is where everybody goes to get the most up-to-date work. So if you're doing a project with more than one or two people, you're going to want to declare one of your repositories to be blessed. It's the place that's going to be the actual official storage point. All of these are equivalent. They can all hold the same information, but it's going to be blessed because it's going to be the one where everybody goes to get the updates, and it's going to be the one that's official in some sense. And that's only by agreement, because again, any of these are equivalent. And if you get angry at the person maintaining the blessed repository, you fork his repository, and then you create your own blessed repository and your own way of interacting, right? So any of these can be blessed. We're going to kind of give you an organization where people are friendly, they're getting along, and everything is hunky-dory. You're going to do your development here, right? You're going to do your development on your named repository. Right? So you're going to do so you're going to do your development down on this repository here, your version. You're going to make your changes there. And you notice that this is a two-way arrow. So you can push your changes from your repository to your stored version in the cloud, back and forth. I'll show you how to do that in just a few minutes. Really easy. And you're going to do development stuff. And then when you're done, what you're going to do is you're going to ask via pull request for these guys, the blessed repository, to pull your stuff in. So you're going to develop, and by the way, there are many ways of working in Git. This is one of the most common ones. It's particularly common for projects of more than a few people. You can all have access to any individual repository. That's called collaborative. So you can all collaborate in one environment, but you all have to be named. This is a way of collaboration where you don't have to know everybody, and it's what we recommend you generally do. You'll find this in most big companies when you're working. You'll find something like this. Most of the open source projects that you work with will do something like we have here, right? So you're going to be making your changes. You're going to ask this blessed repository to take them in. They'll take them in. At the same time you're doing this, what you're going to find out is that somebody else is also making changes. And they're also forked. And they're also changing the repository via these pull requests. So every now and then, in order to stay up to date with what's on the leader's machine, you're going to have to do a pull request. Not a pull request. Yeah, well, a pull, not a pull request. You'll have to do a pull from the leader's machine to get all of the updates onto your machine. Okay? This is called this is generally referred to as upstream. So you have to get updates from upstream. And this is generally called blanking. Origin, sorry. And this is generally called the origin. So the origin is the version you're working in, the fork you're working in. And you have push and pull back in there. You can go put anything you want out there. And then upstream is the blessed repository that everybody's syncing from. And you generally don't push directly there, but you'll have to pull from it to get any of the updates. Okay? So this is hopefully all the vernacular we're going to need. We'll come back to that if we need it. But that's just going to set the stage for where we want to work. Yeah. No. Okay, fork is a complete copy and it can include branches. We'll talk about branches in just a minute. I'll talk about them in just a minute because they come in more when you're working down here or when you're pushing up. Okay, so they're really important. Fork is a complete copy of the repository. A branch is a working version of the repository with changes that may or may not be intended to go back into a main. And we'll kind of get into those a little bit and show you where they're useful. All right, so fork is not a synonym for branch. Very good question, though. It would be great if it was. And by the way, this whole fork thing, that's relatively new terminology. Before this, to fork a repository meant that you were taking your toys and going home, and it was generally a very cataclysmic thing. So there's two ways of referring to a fork. One is, you're a jerk, I'm not going to work with you anymore, and I'm walking away and starting my own. That's a fork. But it's also just making a copy in GitHub or GitLab because, I don't know, they usurped the language. If you're going to really fork, you had to make a fork. So I don't know. All right. So that's generally the world we're going to be working in, right? So now let's actually start doing something. I'm going to go to GitHub. How many of you have new projects? Okay. So if you're doing a new project, you actually have to create the project, right? So I'm going to go to me, I think, because I'm also Arcos. But let's go to me, and we'll create a new repository. Okay, so if you didn't notice, what I did was I just clicked on that little new repository button, right? Click on the new repository button. It brings you to a page and it lets you set up a repository. So we're going to set up a really stupid repository, then I'm going to throw it away probably immediately. You probably don't have this. I can set repositories up with a couple of different owners. I'm going to choose myself as the owner for this one, and then I'm just going to say throw me away. Because at the end of this, I think I'm going to throw this away. We'll see how badly I mess it up first. You should put a description. Okay, and in general, well, specific, if you're doing this in Arcos, we're going to want you to make it public so that anyone on the internet can see it and access it, because if it's not public, then it's not really a good example of open source. So we're going to try to make it public. We want you guys to make it public. We asked you to set up a README. So, you can set up a README. This will allow you to put in a longer description. What I generally recommend is if you did your proposal in Markdown, just upload your proposal. If not, write a little Markdown and refer to your PDF, and then put your PDF in the same directory when you figure out how to do that. make sure your proposal is kind of in there. It's a good README. It should tell people roughly what you're doing and what your initial thought on timescale. You can ignore the git ignore for now. Although if you're doing something like dealing with JavaScript or anything that compiles and creates a bunch of useless files, you probably want to play with that, but we can help you out. You do need to select a license. Now, if you don't select the license initially, it's okay. We can help you set up a license. But in fact, Siggy's gonna give a presentation, a workshop on licenses in, I think, next week. So, if you're unsure, you can not choose a license for now. Make sure you have one by the end of the semester. Because if you don't have a license by the end of the semester, you're not actually doing open source. You're doing essentially a honey trap for people so that they come in and use your stuff and then you can sue them and get money. Don't do that. It's not open source if you don't have a license. My favorite licenses, when we talk about this, we'll talk about permissive and copyleft licenses. My favorite license to use, particularly if you're not sure what you want to do right now, is one of the permissive ones, probably either Apache, MIT, or BSD 3-clause. The beauty of those is you can always change them to anything else. That's why they're called permissive. You don't have to live with a permissive license. You can change it to something else, including something that's not permissive. You can even take, if you guys think that you have a wonderful idea, when you graduate, you can even take a permissive license and take the code internally and make it private. You do have to give credit to people who wrote it, but you can take it private. The thing is, taking it private isn't necessarily what you think. Taking it private means that anything you do from that point on doesn't have to be disclosed. Doesn't stop anybody who has the initial library before you stopped publishing your things under the permissive license from actually doing the same thing you are. So you can create your own competition. It's not good to rely on open source software as the sole differentiator in a business, but Red Hat got sold for $4 billion for essentially burning CDs of software that was free. Not really. I mean, they did a lot of support. They made sure their packages worked. But that's essentially what they were doing. They were selling free software. And people were happy to pay. Because if you're a business, maintaining that software is hard. So I'm going to choose the MIT. I'm going to choose the BSD 3-clause this time. Those are my three favorites. They're my three favorites because they maintain the most options for you guys going forward. We'll talk about copyleft. If you're more of a philosophical on this, copyleft means that once it's open source, it has to stay open source in some sense. People can't change the license on you, and you can't change the license either. Unless you hold full copyright, it gets complicated. We'll talk about that in the licensing. If you hold full copyright, you can do whatever you want. Once you do that, you just hit create repository, and now you have a repository, and it created a README for me that has the name of the repository and that description that I typed in, and you can do whatever you want with that. You can edit that inline. We'll show you how to not edit it inline, but you can edit it inline and add stuff to it, etc. And if you're just doing minor stuff, particularly on text files, it's easy enough just to come in here and do some things and then commit your changes. This is the commit message, the header for the commit message, and then you can say something like just messing around. Right, and now the stuff we just added is part of our repository. And if we go back to our code, we can actually see our commits. And we had two of them. The first one was the initial commit, where we created the repository, we attached the license to it, and we created our README. Okay, and then the second commit is where we went in and we changed our README to say stuff and etc. Okay, any questions on this? That's the minimum bar to creating a repository. Okay, and this is now an open source repository. It is relatively useless, and like I said, I will probably just throw it away. There's not really anything here, but it is open source. It's licensed correctly with a BSD license, and we're set to go. Where are we? 305. We're not too bad. Okay, so I created this library, and now I have a team of you bright young guys and gals and everything else. And what we're going to do now is we're going to work on this, and we're going to what we're going to do is we're going to start setting up an organization. And what we're going to do is we're going to start adding people to our repository. And the best way to do this is to generate a fork. Okay, that's the organization that we had up here, right? We took and we forked it. Right now, this is me. We can add other people on. All those other people have to do is come into the repository and do a fork. And for me, since I have multiple things, I have to choose where I'm going to fork it. I'm going to fork it to Arcos. And, you know, you can decide to copy the main branch, or if you're working with somebody, you can copy all of them. Generally, particularly if you're just getting started, you only have to copy the main branch. And now we're going to create a fork. And what we'll see is that now I have two versions of the library, of the repository. I'm going to duplicate this, right? I have Arcos here, and I can come in here and I can also have throw me away under WD Turner. Okay, so now I have two versions of it. This is simulating me being two different people, but we now have our two licenses, our two repositories. All right, so now I'm Arcos, and what I want to do is I want to start working in my repository. And I'm going to do something more complicated than just modifying some text files. So what I want to do is I want to do this clone operation. I want to pull down a full version of that onto my local machine so I can do things like create Python code, run it, look at data, do all of that stuff that we really want to be able to do. And to do that, it's fairly simple. I'm going to assume, by the way, that you guys have accounts on GitHub, and I'm going to assume that you have Git installed. Both of those take a while if you don't have them, but we can help you with that. It's not insurmountable. Generally, the instructions are pretty good. They're actually covered fairly well in the pointer that I'll give you to the CS 4470 slides. So we will get that going. I want to clone this. I'm going to clone it into my Arcos. I'm going to clone my Arcos version. We're going to maintain WD Turner as the blessed repository. So I can click on this code button. And if I'm set up correctly, I can use the SSH key, which means I don't have to enter a new password every time. I can set up a private public password key so that I can automatically validate myself or verify myself. I recommend using that, but it's not always necessary. I'll copy that, and then I'll come down into, this is just an Ubuntu window. It has Git installed, and now I will do a Git clone, and I'll paste that string from, I think I can move that up on the screen a little bit more. That was a little too, well, maybe not. Let's see what we do. Yeah. Okay, so this is just going to do a clone operation. All it's going to do is download everything from the repository. And now if I look, we have throw me away right here on the repository. And I can go down into throw me away. And we can look, and all we have right now are the two things we put in a license and a README. All right. And if we look, the license should be the BSD 3-clause license, which is what we put on. And the README should just have those few words that we put in. Class demo, it should be short-lived, stuff, etc. All right. So this is exactly the same as what we have online in both of our repositories, right? This is our course. This is the one file, license and README. And then we also have WD Turner, again, license and README. They're essentially the same things we just saw. Okay, so we are fully caught up to everything. Now let's talk about branches. This is a full version of the repository. I'm going to start working on it. Chances of me working on it successfully and not making a mistake are relatively small. Actually, it's relatively high right now because I'm not doing much. But if you're doing a lot of changes, you're going to want to be able to get back to where you started from. So that's where a branch comes into hand. It comes in handy. By the way, I'm going to show you all the command line things. You can do most of this from the other tools. I know them on the command line. I think it's good to know them on the command line, so I'm going to teach you on the command line. And there are multiple. I'm about 2 years behind on my Git terminology, so I use old school Git, creating branches and things. There are other ways of doing it now, but these ways work, and they work just fine. So I'm going to create a branch, and to create a branch, I'm going to use the checkout command, and I'm going to tell it to check out a branch with the -B, and now I'm going to give it a branch name, and I'm going to say working. Right, and now I can look at my branches, and I can see that I have 2 branches. One is the main branch. That's the code that is supposed to be working, correct code, the stuff we're trying to protect. And the working branch is the one I'm going to work in for right now to try and develop some new feature or fix some bug. In general, branches are very cheap in Git. They're very easy to get back from. So we recommend using branches whenever you're working on some other feature. Because the cool thing is I can come in here and I can do something like gvim hello.py, and I can create some code that does right? Now created a file, and I can run, hopefully run. Ah, made a mistake. Right? Run hello.py will actually work. But that could be doing anything. It doesn't have to be hello.py. It could be something vastly more complicated. But I can go in there and I can actually generate this stuff and make it work. All right. And I'm now on a branch. Oh, and what I wanted to show you was I'm now on a branch working. If I check out main, sorry, not ready yet. Got to go back. Got to follow my notes. So we have this working branch, and we have a file in it. So let me show you a few other commands. We've now gone in. We've created a file hello.py. It exists, but let's take a look at what our Git thinks we are. Right now, we use the git status command to see what the status of our repository is. So right now, what this says is that we're on branch working, right? But we have untracked files. Untracked files are files that don't appear in your repository yet. They're things you've just created. So I just created hello.py. It's on my disk. It's in my directory, right? It sits right there. We can look at it. But the repository doesn't know anything about it yet. So what we want to do is we want to tell the repository, this is a file we're interested in, and then check it in so that the repository has the most recent version. So this is two commands. Git add hello.py, wildcard characters work. If you've done a lot of things, a dot will start at the current directory and put everything in. I like to be a little bit careful because you can get in a lot of garbage that way. But if we do git add hello.py and now do our git status command again, what we'll see is that it's now turned green. And it's called a new file. We're still on branch working. And it now knows that there's a file hello.py that's supposed to be in the repository, and it's queued up, but we haven't actually told the repository that this is the version we want to use. So the next command would be a git commit. And git commit with no arguments will look at the files that you have on there, in this case, hello pi, and then bring up an editor so that you can tell it information about it. So in general, what you want to do with this is you want to have right? Give it a title that tells it good reference, right? Like a good magazine article. And then down here, you can just say what you actually did. Okay. When you're looking at things, this line will always be shown, the top line, right? That's the headline, tells you what's going on. Down below, this you can look at if you need more information. Now, Git is a fairly powerful system. It already knows if you set yourself up correctly, it already knows who you are. It already knows when you're making this commit, and it already knows all the specific changes you've committed, right? So it's not really necessary to tell it those things. Tell it what you're doing beyond that. Why did you make this change? Why was it necessary? Are you answering an issue? You know, are you fixing a bug, etc. Once you're done, you can just save it and exit it. And now we've actually made the change, and we can say git status, and it'll tell us that we are still on branch working, and our working tree is clean. Everything that we had developed is now saved out to the repository on our laptop, right? We're still dealing with this part of the world, right? We're not dealing with anything above that blue line. We're just down in this part of the world still. But within that part of the world, we're actually clean. And we can see that hello pi is there. Now, this is why branches are important. If we now do a git checkout main, right? We've now switched our branch. We can do a git status. We're up to date on origin main, right? Remember we said that origin is this link here, right? We're now up to date with origin main. But when we look at it, there's no hello pi file, right? Hello pi file is just on working. Okay, we haven't merged it back to main yet. Any questions? All right, so now this is where it gets fun. what we want to do is we want to get our change from our local computer all the way over to the main computer, right? So we have to figure out how to do that. Well, the first thing I want to do is I want to push it I want to push it from here where it exists to my fork, right? Because that gets it out on the web. And that is really complicated and hard to do. It's essentially a git push operation. Now, if you haven't set up your remote to track the branch, you'll get this. I don't know why they don't just ask if you want to do this, because you just copy that, and this is just asking me for IP address stuff. So you just copy that line, you paste it in, it sets it, and then you do a push. And once you push, it tells you that it's successfully set branch working, set up to track remote branch working from origin. So what does that mean? Well, we want to track to our origin, right? Now, if we go look at our origin, what we'll find out is that we have a working branch there as well, and that's in the Arcos branch. All right, so now we can come down here and we can look. You notice that in our main branch, we still don't have working, but we do have a working branch here. And that working branch has our hello Pi file. All right, so we've now pushed to a branch working on our remote. Let's do an easy one here. What we can do now is we can come in, right? So now we've got it from here to here. You can push that way often. Feel free to push that out every time you leave the building, just in case you drop your computer in a puddle and it goes belly up, right? You can keep modifying working branch, push as many times as you want, get your working branch to whatever state you want. When you've finished what it is you're working on and you want to bring it back to the master, to the blessed repository, right, then you want to do what's called a pull request. And to do a pull request, you come in and you click on, surprisingly, pull request. I think both of these will work, right? So now if we look up here, what it says, we want to do a pull request, and I can click on these various things and change them if I wanted to do a pull, right? This is the repository we just pushed to, and it says we want to do a pull request that takes from here and brings it to here. So we want to take from Arcos to the Arcos fork to the WD Turner version, and we want to take the working branch that we just created, and we want to pull that over to main. Okay, and that's pretty much what we want to do. So this is, the commit message from our push. We just come down here and do a pull request. Okay, so these things are good. They come back green. That means everything's ready, and we're ready to do our pull request. You'll notice that what it did, though, was it pulled me into WD Turner instead of the Arcos directory. That's because the Arcos account can't, we want to merge it into the WD Turner account, and the WD Turner account has to actually do the approvals. Now, I'm the approval person in both, so I can do that. You might not always be. We can come in here and we can look at all the changes that are in the pull request, right? We can see that before there was no file, hello Pi. Now there is one, and it has one line in it. So I can go through there. I can review the changes. I can say the changes are good. and I can approve the changes. Of course, I can't approve my own pull request, which is unfortunate. But we'll do that, and then I can do it from here. So I can't approve my own pull request. You'll have to get somebody else to do that, but I can merge my pull request and confirm my merge. And now what we'll find out is that when we go back to the code, this is in the WD Turner account, you'll find out that hello.py is there, and it's there on the main branch. All right, so that's a very, very simple pull request. Now, we're going to do a few other things just to kind of make this, mix it up a little bit. Your pull requests aren't always approved. Sometimes there's issues. Let's create an issue. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to change hello.py. Yeah, let's change hello.py. And instead of saying hello world, I'm going to say hello everybody. We want to be inclusive. Okay. So this, now we've got hello everybody in there. We'll commit our changes. We can add a description. Okay. And I'm going to violate all rules of good development, and I'm going to just submit directly to the main branch for now, and I'll commit that change. Okay. So now hello.py no longer just says hello world. It now says hello everybody on the main branch, right? And that's only here in the Blessed repository. All right. On my own repository, on the Arcos repository, we don't have hello.py in the repository to begin with, but if we go to our working repository, our working branch, right, hello.py is there, and it all only has hello world, right, not hello everybody. And when I come down here, it still says hello world. I decided I wasn't done with hello.py, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to change it. So I'm going to do a edit the file. At this point, it would have been faster just to type it in, but I'm going to edit the file, and I'm going to say, all hail our robot overlords. And I'm actually going to change this as well, just to make sure we get a good conflict. Hello, electronics. Okay. So I'm still working in our working branch. I can do a git status again, and what we'll see is it still knows that hello.py is in our repository. We didn't remove it, but it's been changed and it hasn't been staged for commit now. We can do a git add again. I'll do a git add dot this time, and do a git status. And we'll see that now the file's been modified, but it is staged to be brought into the repository. We can do a git commit -m. This is short. Remember I told you last time, if we don't put anything there, it'll just go out and give us an editor. Well, if you want to just do it on the command line, you can. So I can say commit two from me. And then I can skip a line, right? I have double quotes. I skip down a line. I can put in some other stuff. And end it. And now, if we look, right, these are the commit messages. Git log, by the way, shows you all of the commits that have gone in. You can see this is, right, this is the headline, right, just like this is a headline. This is the longer message, just like this is the longer message. So that's a shortcut for actually putting those in. And now we can do a git status again. And what we'll find out is that we're on branch working. We're one commit ahead of our working branch in the cloud. Our tree is clean. So now we can just do a git push, and that'll push all of our changes out to our repository under Arcos. And now we can see that Hello Pi has our hello electronics and all hail our robot overlords in it. Okay. So now we've changed it, and we've also changed it. Somebody else has changed it on the main site, and now we're different. Right. So we can come in here. We still want to get our changes in. So we're going to go in and we're going to do a pull request again. And this time we will do a new pull request. And we again want to come from our working branch. And we want to merge into the main branch. Now we have an issue, and it's telling us that it can't automatically merge. So let's see what the issue is. Well, the issue is that, well, let's see what the issue is. We're going to create the pull request anyway, right? And this is going to take us, and I'm not going to, we'll just leave that. I'm not going to add anything else. And now we're on the WT Turner account. We're trying to look at the pull requests. And what the pull request is telling us that we have conflicts that must be resolved. And it's telling us we have to get rid of those. So if we do the resolve conflicts, we can see that this stuff on the working branch is what we typed in on the working branch, and this stuff on the main branch is what we typed in on the main branch as WD Turner. This was typed in as Arcos. I don't want to resolve this right now, so I'm going to go back, and I'm going to show you an alternate way to resolve it that lets you actually use all of your tools. All right. So we have conflicts that must be resolved. We can come in and we can do a git pull. Oops. We could do a git pull from the WD Turner account, and that would work. But let's talk about something else first. What we want to do is we want to resolve this merge issue. And there's still one thing that we haven't discussed in going over everything else. I've shown you every one of these links except for this upstream link. Upstream link is how you get the stuff from the main repository. So what we can do is set up an upstream link. I didn't walk through this version, so we'll see how well I can do just off the cuff. We can come in here, we can go to the code, we can get the same link, right? This is the link to the repository. I'm going to copy that. And now I'm going to come back to my repository. And if I do something called git remote, I'm going to give it the -v flag. Git remote without the -v just tells you that we have origin, right? I told you origin was our main repository, the repository we were working in, our fork. But I can do a git remote -v, and that tells me that it points to this repository. Well, I can do a git remote add, and then I can give it any name. But in general, if I want to link back to the upstream, I'll give it the name upstream, and then the link to WD Turner repository. And now if we look at our remotes, what we'll see is we have origin links and upstream links. So now we actually have the ability to access our upstream repository, right? And we can come in and we can access it. So we can do something like git pull upstream main. I think that's the right formation. What we want to know is we want to know what changed on main, because we generated a conflict that we have to figure out. So we want to pull from upstream, we want to pull the main. Right? And that tells us this is the same thing we were getting when we tried to do the merge in the website, the pull request in the website. It's telling us there's an issue. So when we try to pull from main into our working branch, we can't actually do it. And if we look at hello now, what we'll find out is hello has that same conflict that we saw when we looked at the conflict on the website. This, these the bars and the head and the tail here tell you essentially where the conflict exists. So what we're going to do is we're going to resolve our conflict by putting in what it should actually look like, right? You may have to talk to somebody. You may have to talk to the person that put the other push in at some point to get this. We'll run it just to make sure it works, right? We'll add it. We'll commit it. I'm not going to put in another long line. And now we'll push it again. Okay. And we can do a git status, and that should tell us that everything's up to date. And if we go back now to pull request on WD Turner, right? We're going to find out that since we've resolved the issue, we can now merge our merge request in. And we can review it if we'd like. All right. All right. So this is important. The Arcos working branch can now be safely deleted. So we can delete that. That will delete it off of, right? We've now committed everything from it in. We can get rid of it. That should have deleted it off of the Arcos branch. right? So we now no longer have working branch down there. But if we come in here and we look, we still have the working branch down here. Right, it doesn't affect what's on our computer. We can delete that if we want. Git branch -d. All right. What does this mean? If we look at our main, we don't even have a low pi in there. We've just lost all of our work, right? Once we've merged it to main, right, that's when we want to execute this branch again, get our main up to date with what we just put in. And that's just a very simple check out to main, right? I'm now in the main branch. And I can do a git pull upstream. Okay, and now we have our whole pi and we can do a Python. All right, and everything works. All right, does that make sense? Any questions? You guys feel better or worse about starting to use it? Yeah, better? Okay, good. That's a lot of stuff I threw at you. It is infinitely complicated. I'll put I think I got this tape. We'll make sure. I'll put it up. But feel free to ask questions. And also, if you go to GitHub and you look at Arcos, I'm going to leave the throwaway thing up for a little bit so you guys can trace through that if you need to. And you go to their 72 repositories. Come on, just go, take me there. And you go down to CSCI 4470 open source. This is an open source course we teach whenever we can. And you go down into modules. Most of this material was derived from module 02, topics on version control. And what you'll find is that there are, if you clone the repository, there are 2 HTML files, Git introduction part 1 and Git introduction part 2, that will walk you through all of this again. And if you really want to do it, there is a lab that you can walk through to kind of practice. Okay, so you're welcome to use that. It is open source. If you have any changes to it, let us know. All right, any questions? All right. I guess I need to give you a code. So okay, you should be able to go to the Git introduction workshop. There's the code. Yeah, give me just a second. Blah, blah, that's stupid. Give me a second, give me a second. How late you guys want to be here? Oh, come on. Git workshop, February 7th. Git introduction, June 9th. There we go. 15:45. Mine says 15:45 right now. There, we've got 5 minutes. That should be enough. Kayang? Of course you are. Kyle? Jay? Yijun? Isabel? Bijan? Hanjian? Max? Can't be Max and. Okay. Itamar I saw. Daniel. All right. All right. Thank you, guys. Right now, so I'd like to report this. Don't leave it blank. You don't have family blanks. Thank you. Thank you. I'll give it to you. I probably should like talk to somebody, but I'm not in the mood. What's your?
Jeff, sure. Sure, you do. SHER.
SHER.
Thank you, yeah. I didn't notice the code and then I realized, oh.
Thank you. Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Bless me.
I know. And you have like five. Have you done one? Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Hope it helps.